All right, Becky, thank you very much for joining me today. So basically, the reason I wanted to have you here today is that you're probably one of the more experienced spinal people that I know. You've been injured quite a long time, so I feel like your insight and your knowledge will be useful to a lot of people that are at any stage of their injury, really, because you've been through it all.
Around a while.
So if you could start with sort of explaining maybe, what your life was around the time you had your injury and when it was, and
Okay,
let's go
so
from that.
my injury was back in 1990, so nearly 30 years ago now.
I won't tell you what year I was born then.
No, that's not. I was, you can probably work out my age myself now, but I was 17 at the time. I was a swimmer and I was going early morning swimming before school and slid on black ice. I was, I suppose, an inexperienced driver at that time, rushing because I was late. And spun the car and ended up with a C5-6 spinal injury. So a big change in my life back then, but here I am now 29 years later.
Yeah. Wow. So as I say, that's as long as I've been alive. So you've obviously experienced quite a lot of difference over the years in terms of treatment of spinal injuries and that, which I think we'll dive into a bit later in that. But let's talk about yourself a bit more to start with. So in those sort of early days and that, what was it like back in the sort of spinal unit for yourself and that?
It's funny, I had a great time in the hospital.
Yeah.
I always say that was one of the best years of my life.
All right.
I was actually in for 13 months. Stays in hospital at that point were longer generally than they are now. But then I went home. I was still living with my parents. They had their house adapted for me with help from their friends and the local community. So I went back home. I was doing my A-levels, so I dropped down a year but went back and finished my A-levels at school. School were very accommodating actually, and willing to have me back and everything, but access in those days is not quite what the expectations would be today.
Yeah.
So there was no ramp to get in to the door. The sixth form block was upstairs, and I literally got carried up every day. They managed to sort out a toilet for me. So
that would not be allowed these days to
No, and I've been back to the school since, and they now have ramps. And I don't think a lift, but I think they do, because they've had people in wheelchairs since, and they just schedule their lessons downstairs accordingly and stuff. So, but yes, they've got much better access requirements now. I managed to finish my A-levels and then went on to university and did a degree and then a postgraduate degree.
So I'll backtrack a bit there with what you were saying.
Quick summary.
Yeah, we get through some of the bits that we were talking about in a bit more detail. So with when you were going to university and that, what was that like from the wheelchair perspective? Was there other people there that were in situations like yourself? Was that more accommodating than school, for example?
Yeah, it was. Actually, it was great. Obviously, looking around, going to see which ones I wanted to go to, that was slightly, you're marrying up firstly the course and the university from a sort of academic point of view, and then obviously checking out their kind of access kind of arrangements and stuff. But I think it still is today, but at the time, each university had like a senior tutor that had overall responsibility for disabled students, and I went to Warwick and they were very good. They had a really lovely guy, the senior tutor, Dr. Stone, there, since retired, and he effectively looked after me whilst I was there in a sense. But they had accessible accommodation on campus.
Oh, that's good.
Basically stayed in the same room for the 3 years. Moved across to the postgraduate block for my final year. But again, lovely big room, big wet room.
Yeah.
Rooms for carers. Had carers live in with me at the time. So it was no problems. It took a bit of arranging and getting you know, understanding what was available and stuff, and obviously different universities differed, but Warwick was very good.
Yeah, but for the 90s, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
You know, that's something you would expect from university today.
Yeah.
For their standards and that. But I always find, in my experience of going to universities, that they seem to be quite ahead of the curve for access and that compared to others.
Yeah, I think they.
And they should probably outsource what they do to
yeah, they should.
Because I went to Bournemouth University recently to do my personal training qualifications, and they couldn't be more accommodating. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, every building is accessible. There's no oh, here's a disabled entrance and here's the regular entrance. It's like, no, this is the regular entrance. It's fully accessible. And
I mean, the campus generally at Warwick was very good. I'm just thinking back as to the one issue that there wasn't so much, and I did need to get lifted up a couple of steps, was to get into the lecture hall where I did my subject, which is on a slightly different campus. But getting into the building was fine. It was just quite an old auditorium type, 3 steps at the front, and I just sat at the front of the lecture hall. But all around the Students' Union, all the other sort of buildings, getting to the library, they all had lifts. No problem at all.
Yeah. And back in those days, do you think there was sort of a slightly... Sorry, I don't mean to see back in the days like
I'm not that old.
So, do you think like the attitude towards disabled people was different back then, or...?
I've always found that kind of attitude-wise, I think lots of people react to you how you might react to them. So if you are confident and outgoing and willing to push boundaries, then I've always found people open and willing to help me kind of do that, in a sense. And I've never really experienced anything in general society of any sort of discriminatory nature as such. Having said that, I think generally in society, disability is much more visible. Still, I think a long way to go, but I think there is a much more openness and acceptance of people with differing disabilities. The access and physical world, certainly here in the UK, is getting better all the time. Obviously, there's still lots of old buildings where access isn't great, and you do have to go in the rear entrance to something to be able to get in. But that's improving all the time, and often it's attitudes of places to get over hurdles that is the thing. You've seen lots of examples with lots of old buildings where they've said, oh, we can't do it because we're a grade 2 listed, blah blah blah. But then you find others that they have made it possible.
Yeah, I recently went to the Roman Baths. Bath, and that was absolutely fantastic for access. They said it's 90% accessible, but a small bit that they said, like, I don't think there's any way that they could anyway. The door was too narrow, and it means they would have to knock down an old wall, and it's like they wouldn't expect them to do that anyway. But the rest of it is absolutely fantastic. They've raised the floor above the old floor, so it's all nice and smooth and run through, and lifts everywhere all throughout the building. So, and that's one of the oldest things in the country to go and see. So if they can do it, I'm sure other places can too. I think it's a matter of, from what I see it as, maybe it's all down to do with money at the end of the day. If they don't see the value in it, they might be like, well, we don't see that many disabled people. There's probably a reason why they don't see that.
Well, it's that catch-22, isn't it? It's kind of, you don't provide the access, people won't go, and, vice versa. But
But I think more companies than that are realising, that we have an ageing population in the country. People are living longer, so therefore there are going to be more people in situations where they need to access. So,
absolutely.
The disabled population is growing; it's not shrinking. So,
there's the beauty of inclusive design. Obviously, with new builds and things today, generally, it can then be factored into the building process.
Yeah.
We've both witnessed occasions where perhaps it's designed by somebody who doesn't really understand what access means. At least it's it's certainly better than it was in the 90s. The legislation helps.
Yeah, definitely.
We're before the the Disability Discrimination Act, which was obviously the pre-runner to the Equality Act now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't want to have to settle on the law always just to be able to go and have a drink in a pub.
Yeah.
So.
That's the great thing about things like, obviously, like with the internet these days, is there's so many people out there that are promoting awareness in different ways. You might remember the advert, I think it was an advert that the guy who was going around town and he's trying to have a drink with his mate in a pub, but he couldn't get in, so they had to choose their venue just because of that.
Yeah.
So obviously all those other places lost the customer, but you
Yeah.
know, the one place that did gain a customer, and there's other YouTubers that I like to watch that are highlighting this sort of.
That's the
these
thing,
areas.
it's highlighting it, isn't it? And it's, I'm a big advocate for, if you're not going to make it easy for me, I'm not going to come in.
Yeah.
I'm quite willing to take my custom elsewhere.
Yeah.
But is that really going to affect their bottom line?
No, they won't know.
Unless, en masse,
Yeah.
people do that. So, yeah, the publicity is a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely good. I see a lot of it because I'm in that sort of area of wanting to see that stuff. But
Yeah.
I have noticed other people telling me who aren't disabled that they see these things, and it's like, and then they've said, "Oh, I might not take my custom there
Yeah.
because they
yeah,
haven't
you
got
are.
the access from my friends. So why would I give them the custom if they don't want to help
Yeah.
my person, like something out that I know?" So
Yeah.
those sort of things are quite good.